Good morning, friends. So, today I wanted to talk about self-help, self-help books, self-help podcasts, optimizing your life. It sort of feels like a natural continuation of yesterday's topic of like optimizing for where you live. So I used to read a lot of self-help books, and I mean they're not all bad, but I think their popularity is a symptom of something greater. So I think it really took off in like the 2010s, where you saw someone would do a TED talk and they talk about something and it would sound really good. It made a lot of sense. An example is growth mindset, for example. And they were usually like an academic in psychology or an adjacent field. And it would kind of go, the TED Talk would go viral and people would generally be positive to it. And then the author would gain some fame and write a book. So this was the formula. And the books generally also follow a formula where it's the point is usually like 2 pages, and then there's 10 pages of anecdotes, and then every chapter is basically like that, and then that's the entire book. And after reading a few of these, I kind of started seeing this pattern, and I felt like it's a bit, it just feels like filler, and you don't need to read the books to really get the point. And what's his name? The author, Mark Mason. I don't remember his name. One of those famous self-help book authors. He talked about this in one of his videos where he said he basically doesn't read self-help books anymore, but for a different reason. He just goes to AI and has AI summarize the book, and you get like a very condensed version of the same thing, just without all the useless anecdotes, which don't really add anything anyway. So if you do want to read a self-help book, just ask an LLM or your favorite AI, and that is, ask it to summarize the book for you. Save yourself hours. You can have the same thing in like 10 minutes. But I think you shouldn't even go that far. I think self-help books are like the nature of them, and this applies to the podcast as well, is that there is something to optimize, there's something to fix. And I'm not saying don't be ambitious. That's not at all what I mean. I think ambition is good. But I think this notion that I'll read this book and I'll learn this productivity skill or whatever it is, and then I will function, or then I can be better or something like that. I think that's a false premise. I don't think there is truth in that. I mean, self-help books have been around for a long time. I think Dale Carnegie was the first big one with how to make friends and influence people, or whatever it was. I have read that, by the way. There's some shame in saying that, but I have read that book. So yeah, the whole notion of self-help books is that there is something to fix, and I think it's always easy to look at your situation and think that these books are the answer. These books will help you optimize. These books will help you get ahead, and I think that's a big one. A lot of people see these as, oh, I'll read this book and learn the tricks, if you will, in this book, and that will help me get ahead. That's a big one, I think. And usually, basically, it's not going to do that. Like, I think the effect of these books, like, yes, it can have a positive impact, but usually or always it's marginal at best. I think if you spent that time just doing whatever it is that you want to be doing instead, that would always be a better use of time. So whatever your skill is, whatever your ambition is, do that. Save the money and the time on the book. That's basically what I would recommend. So, like I said, I used to read a lot of self-help books because I have a very analytical mind, and it's to my own detriment. So I tend to over invest in kind of optimizing these kind of things. I also have ADHD. That doesn't help either. So productivity books often felt like productivity. I think that's a common ADHD. It's a common ADHD policy. But to zoom out a little bit, I think the whole self-help genre blowing up in the way it did, and I think it's mainly popular with young people, and I think there is a wider reason for that, and that is that things are just a little bit more difficult, and they just get more difficult over time. And like, I think, and that's a separate topic, I think the reason for that is that housing is expensive, and housing has gotten more expensive, and now that house prices are sort of flatlining, then instead you have just other living costs going up, like energy and basically everything else has gone up a lot as well. So might turn around here. Time to sweat. So with things just in general being more difficult, and like I said, I think that's another rant. That's another morning rant video. Opportunity becomes more competitive. That's also another video. But in general, things are more difficult economically. Opportunities are more competitive, and I think these are all connected. So naturally, and I think this is especially true for young people, self-help books start to make sense. You invest time in reading this self-help book, and you will improve yourself and be more competitive. And like I said, sometimes that probably is true to some extent. But my argument is, whatever it is that you do, whatever your skill is, whatever your job is, invest the time in that instead of the self-help book. I think that's basically where I stand on these. And just because the system is a bit weird, broken, it doesn't mean that there's something to fix in yourself. And by that, I'm not saying there isn't like personal responsibility or anything like that. I'm saying, be ambitious and take responsibility, but I'm saying self-help books are basically snake oil and not worth your time. And if you do still want to read them, use an LLM or use AI. I mean, that's basically the message. So yeah, chill out, stop optimizing, just do stuff. That's all I have to say this morning. That's what's on my mind. Thanks for listening. Here every morning. Bye.